Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Money Matters Daily. We're going to be walking through the news of the day and the market's closing and trying to explain it to you very simply and quickly. Let's get started. Not type of story we usually cover. I just want to highlight this because it made me very happy. INS Vikrant, which is India's first indigenously built aircraft carrier, has finally completed its sea trials. It was built at a cost of $2.8 billion and displaces 40,000 tons of water, which is an exceptionally large ship. What this means is India now is one of the few countries that has the capability to build and design its own aircraft carriers. Really positive news for the Navy. So I just want to highlight this story to sort of close the circle on something we discussed earlier. Earlier we said that the entire media circus around the US debt ceiling talks was completely unnecessary and that US lawmakers will unquestionably reach a deal eventually. And it seems like that's happening, where US President Joe Biden and Republican lawmaker Kevin McCarthy are getting closer and closer to a deal. And they're now apart by only $70 billion on the US's spending limits. And just to give you some context, the US budget is around $6 trillion in size, and the discretionary spending is $1.7 trillion. So $70 billion is really just a drop in the bucket. And as expected, they will reach a deal and this whole circus will go away. So in another really positive piece of news, it seems like the Indian space industry is counting down to a blast off. So the overall global space economy is worth $440 billion. And in spite of ISRO being one of the most advanced space agencies in the world, with the ability to undertake missions in Mars, the Moon, and beyond, India only makes up 2.1% of the global space economy. So let's understand what the components of that global space economy are. Here's satellite manufacturing, launch services, satellite services, and ground services. So essentially, you have satellite manufacturing and subsystem manufacturing. Then you put that onto a rocket and launch it. And once that satellite is in space, you have services to service those satellites through communications, as well as ground services to manage the communication and support all the other three industries. And in 2020, the government deregulated the sector and allowed for the participation of private companies. And they established the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center, INSPAC. In addition to that, the government is now authorizing FDI into the space sector, hoping to authorize up to 100% FDI in 3 different subsegments: satellite establishment and operations, launch vehicle operations and manufacturing, and subsystem manufacturing. And they're looking to do FDI not only through the government approval route, but also through the automatic route, which should substantially improve the ability of investors to invest in the Indian space startup industry. And if we take a look at the Indian space startup industry, from 2020, which is when the policy was established, to 2022, most recently, there's been a 5-fold increase in the amount of investment, from $20 million in 2020 to $109 million in 2022. And you can see that in the number of startups that have been established as well. In 2020, only 11 new space tech startups were established, and now there's over 100. And hopefully, the establishment of this FDI policy will allow this number to go up even higher and will allow even more investment in the Indian space industry and take advantage of the unique skill set and ecosystem that India has in the space sector. Somewhat worrying news, Russia's Prime Minister just signed a set of agreements with China, expanding their bilateral ties and deepening their economic cooperation. While this is negative news, this is not unsurprising at all. Ever since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, Russia was cut off from the Western economic system and has increasingly relied on China. They were no longer able to import manufactured goods from the EU or the US, and therefore they were relying on China more and more. And because they needed a new market for their hydrocarbons, they sold that hydrocarbons, particularly oil and natural gas, to China as well as India. Let's take a second to look at the numbers, and a shout out to Alexander Gabuev for providing some deep insight on this. You can follow him on Twitter. In the 4 months starting in 2023, particularly Jan to April, Russia-China trade is up 41%. Russian exports to China are only up 25%, which is the hydrocarbon exports, primarily oil and natural gas. But much more worryingly, Chinese exports to Russia are now up 67%. What this is leading to is a cynicization of the Russian economy. What that means is that Russia is more and more reliant on China for its finances and its economy. Another shout out to Alexandra Prokopenko, who you can follow on Twitter, who provides some really interesting analysis and information. Not only is the trade between Russia and China expanded, the currency in which that trade is denominated has shifted from dollars to yuan. So from March 2022 to March 2023, Russian exporters increased their monthly transactions in yuan from 500 million to 7 billion, and importers increased their monthly transactions in yuan from 1.5 billion to 7 billion. While this may not mean very much, if we put it into context, prior to the Russia-Ukrainian war, the ruble-dollar trade was of primary importance to Russia because all of its exports were dollar denominated because they were oil and natural gas exports. And if we fast forward to today, the yuan trade in Russia is much larger than the dollar trade. So effectively, the Russian economy post the Russia-Ukraine war has completely de-dollarized and shifted to yuan trade. And even more worryingly, Russian companies which rely on debt to continue operating, as many companies often do, have started denominating their debt in yuan rather than dollars. And you can see that as well, where almost 30% of all debt in Russia now is yuan denominated, giving China an unprecedented control of the Russian economy, which is very worrying for India. But hopefully we can continue to improve our manufacturing, space and defense capabilities and achieve Atmanirbhar Bharat. Trade today with the Nifty and Sensex up about 1% each. Broad-based buying with FMCG, realty, IT, metals, PSU banks. Every major index was up about 1%. The biggest gainers really were Reliance Industries, and I think we're seeing a lot of positive momentum building up in the markets. The only big losers were Page Industries on the back of weak Q4 numbers. But other than that, seems like clear skies for the Indian economy and the Indian markets. I think that's everything that we have for you for today. If you enjoyed what we have to bring to the table and we're able to give you at least some new and interesting information, please leave a like and subscribe, and we'll be back on Monday.